wellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
You're listening to A Quirky Journey, the healthy family podcast with your hosts Jo Whitten and Leah Follett. Welcome to A Quirky Journey. Join us as we share our family's journeys to good health. You'll find plenty of inspiration, tips and recipe ideas, as well as stories from everyday people who've struggled and overcome health problems and diet challenges in their own families. I'm Jo Whitten, author of the blog and book Quirky Cooking, and today I have with me my good friend Fuad Kassab. Hi Fuad.
Hi Jo, how's it going?
I'm good. We're going to talk today about simplifying. So I was going to call it simplifying and decluttering your life, but that's not very simple, so I thought I'd better just call it simplifying.
Yeah, I think we should leave it at that, Jo.
I think I should. Fuad and I were discussing this a few weeks ago because I'd been reading a book about simplifying your life, basically. It has a very simple title, actually. It's called 7.
Right.
And
Okay.
We started discussing all the different problems with our modern day life and how it can just get so crazy. And I think we all have the tendency to overcomplicate our lives, don't we? Hope it's not just me.
Yes, absolutely.
And just keep adding more and more of everything and then end up feeling exhausted and overwhelmed and sick and just wanting to escape. And
I wonder if it's a cycle or if it's something that,
yeah.
We'll actually be able to overcome and continue to have a simple life for
Yes.
a long time.
I seem to find it a cycle a bit with me.
Yeah.
You know, you pull back and then things slowly build up again and then you pull back. But I think that's probably human nature. I mean, whenever we decide we need to work on something, it only lasts for a certain amount of time and then we sort of forget, don't we?
Yeah. That's so true. And that behavior is in us from when we are really, really young as well. So I look at my children and they display that behavior as well. You know, that kind of... They love collecting things and making a complex collection of stuff, and then afterwards they move on to something else.
Get rid of it all. Start again. Yeah, my kids do the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is it's really interesting because whatever it is that we think that we do as adults, as a conscious choice might be completely evolutionary or just basic human behavior.
Just a natural instinct that
like my daughter collects rocks, and she's 5 years old and she's got a collection of quartz rocks that everywhere she finds quartz, she will just actually collect it.
Yeah.
And that's growing. And I'm like, she's 5 years old. Like why does she feel the need to have a collection of that stuff?
Everybody collects something, don't they?
And I think it comes to us from this, we used to live in seasons where we had to collect. So we had to put it aside for when the times were lean. So whenever something we saw value in it or beauty in it, we'd keep it aside just in case for, when the time comes.
Maybe that's what it is.
When we need it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my explanation anyway.
I'm
no psychologist.
But it's also, I think, in the old days when people lived very simple farming type lives in the country, our great-grandparents and that kind of thing, they had a lot more to do, as in, preparing their food and growing it and killing the chickens before they could eat them and all that work that they had to do and scrubbing their clothes by hand in the creek or whatever.
Yes.
They should have had a lot less time than us, but, they still quilted. They still... did all the hand sewing. They did all these things that I want to do and I don't have time. Why is that? And you kind of start thinking about all the things that we add into our lives that they would just be like, what in the world are you doing?
Yes, absolutely. And there's a lot of things that we think that doesn't take up much of our time, but just measure how much time you spend on your phone when you have a little bit of downtime and instead of doing something that's useful for you,
Well, that's something that really I've been thinking about a lot lately. Is it's very easy to get completely mesmerized by Facebook or Instagram and just not realize how much time you've been on there. I've only just quickly checking this, and then you go, I was supposed to be cooking tea, and it's half an hour late now.
Yeah, I saw this TED speech. I can't remember I think it was a TED speech, and this woman was talking about the phone thing, and she was saying how on the phone we use it as escapism. So
Yeah,
when we're doing these mundane tasks, like say standing in a queue waiting for our checkout at the supermarket, most people are on their phone looking at it because, they are in a period of time where there's nothing happening.
Yeah.
They're completely being forced to be in a place that's not constructive for who they are. So they reach for their phone.
Mm-hmm.
And they try to sort of escape from that physical reality that they're in to be somewhere else that's more interesting for them.
Yeah.
But I feel that creeps into, dinner time, and it creeps into having a conversation with your friends, and
it becomes an addiction.
Yeah, it becomes really entrenched in you. And how do you get over that?
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm still struggling with that one. So don't ask me for all the answers, but it's something that I'm aware of and trying to do better with.
Well, you and I are always chatting to each other on Facebook, so it's not like we're the people who's who should be followed here. But I guess it's because we have those questions, like pretty much everyone else, and I think it's good to voice these questions, and at least when you have them at the forefront of your thinking, you might be able to do something about them and address them and then sort of push them. Yeah, so it's just more raising awareness, and we're all doing the same thing, I think. But
yeah. Well, I remember the first time I went to Sydney a couple of years ago. I was really amazed and kind of shocked. Every time you stopped at a crossing to go across the street, everybody was on their phone. Yeah. And every time you went anywhere, it was like all the like you're saying, in the queues, and I don't see that so much in the country.
Yeah, sure.
And I guess people use it also because in a environment where there's a lot of strangers, you're not going to talk to them because you don't know them. It's so you just go to your phone and talk to your friends or whatever. I guess in a small country town, a lot more people, and you chat as you, standing around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe
it's a little bit rude as well to be.
It's different. It's a little bit different in a small community, I think. So if I have friends over,
stranger, people are like, what? Why are you talking to me?
Exactly. If I have friends over, though, I know that it's rude to be anywhere near my phone, and I'll put it away and turn off the sound sometimes but I think with the younger generations, it's becoming more and more common that you always have your phone with you. You're always chatting to people, even when you're sitting with friends.
Yeah, so taking it back to simplifying, the reason why we're sort of talking about the phone here is really the need to simplify comes from the fact that complicating things takes away from available time for you, which you could be using to become a healthier, better human being, correct? Mm-hmm. That's really the idea behind simplification. It's just you just want to be more comfortable, you want to be happier, you want to be more relaxed and present in the moment, and that's why the phone conversation thing is there.
Sorry, got a bit off the track there, but
no, that's all right. But really, the idea is we have to understand why simplification is important, and if it wasn't, if complexity was actually good for us, then we'd be talking about making things a bit more complex rather than. But there's a fine balance, and what we want to achieve here is a level of daily activity that, and whatever it is that we do, that we can maximize what we do to make them things that are good for us, that make our lives more happy and makes us more satisfied, correct?
I think one of the reasons why I think it's so important to simplify, I know for me, and I know for a lot of the women that I talk to, the busier your life gets with all the running around you've got to do with the kids and taking them places, all the jobs that you've got to do, all the cooking, all the house cleaning, the washing, everything that just, that you have to do every day, plus all the, I guess, keeping in contact with people. I don't know, it seems to be all little things, but it all adds up, and you end up feeling so overwhelmed to the stage where someone will make the smallest request of you and it feels like the end of the world. Yeah, you just cannot cope with another crumb on your plate.
What's the saying in English? Do you have the saying, the straw that breaks the
camel's back? That's right. And I've felt that so many times, where I just have to say no to everything, go away and hide for a while, because otherwise I just can't cope. And I think the problem is that we stress ourselves out with so much stuff and busyness. It affects our health, and we talk a lot about gut health on this podcast. And one of the biggest problems for gut health is stress and exhaustion. So if you're constantly overloading yourself and pushing yourself, and everything's like stressing you out, it's going to affect your health.
Well, the psychological and physiological effects are clear, and also you do make poor choices when it comes to eating when you're stressed.
Of course you do, and you're tired, so you don't bother cooking.
But I really like when you said, you have to say no and go and hide, which is really funny. Like one of the, I've written down a list of things that I wanted to talk about, and saying no is one of those items on the list. I find myself that I equate saying yes to being a nice person. Like I just find people, because I really like that person and I don't want to say no to them. So, but you also should like yourself and you should look after yourself. And the more you say yes to people, you just dilute your energy and you can never do anything right. So, I find one of the strategies that if I want to do something, but I don't have time for it, I'd say, yes, I'd love to do it. I just don't have time for it at the moment. Can I talk to you later?
Yes, that's really good.
Or I'd say, I don't think I can do it. And
just be honest.
Most people are understanding, they won't really get upset.
Well, go ahead.
No, what's your
I've had this experience where I get emails every day from people wanting to tell me about their products, thinking, that maybe I would love to use them on my blog or something, or just wanting to know, needing help or all of that kind of thing. And one email, you think, it shouldn't take long to answer. I can just answer this email, but then it's constant.
Yeah.
And all those little things is where I come unstuck. Seminars and talks and things, even if they're local or even just people wanting to come over for a cuppa and meet me and chat, I want to say yes to all those things. I'm dying to say yes to all those things, but it just gets too much. And so I've been learning to say no and try, and like you say I would absolutely love to and I want to. But the problem is that if I keep putting all those things first, my family suffers and I suffer.
Yes.
And the thing is, for me to try and get across to people that I don't even have time to sit down and have a cuppa with my own mother sometimes. I would love to have a cuppa with everyone who comes along, but I just can't.
Yeah.
So I've had to, and saying no gets easier as you go, I found. At first, I found it really hard. But once I started to realize that people, like you said, they understand. And I had this experience with a friend of mine. She has an awesome online program, and she asked me if I'd, like to help her promote it. And I really believe in it. It's a great program. But I said, I really think at the moment I better not, because I've got too much on my plate. I don't want to start another thing right now. And she said, you know what? That helped me so much, because I needed to hear that, because I've been promoting too much, doing too much. And I've had that from other people too. Once we had all the problems with Isaac and I stepped back from Facebook and I said, I'm not going to be posting as much and other people are going to help me post. And people came to me on my page and said, that really helped me, because I need to hear that from other people, saying it's okay to step back, it's okay to say no.
Yeah, it's a big deal, and I think it's a skill that you have to learn, saying no. And it takes courage at first, and you feel bad, but then eventually when you see that the response isn't as bad as you imagined, then definitely it's in your favor. One of those things I do, because I get emails as well, definitely not as much as you would, but because of my blog and the restaurants and all that. And sometimes they are interesting to me, and they're things that I want to address, but I don't have time to sort of sit down and write a proper reply. So what I do is I reply and say, look, I want to get back to you. I don't have the time at the moment, but I expect an email from me at some point. And that sort of, makes sure that the communication is there. I don't feel like I've neglected replying to that person.
Because that in itself puts another stress on you. knowing that you've got them hanging over you, that you haven't replied.
So the hanging over thing is, I think, one of the biggest things that I've learned to deal with recently.
Tell me how.
So I've come, I'll give you this tip. I don't know if I've spoken to you about this, but I come from a software engineering background, so that's what I've been doing for 15 years almost now. And there's a development methodology called agile development. So it's basically the way that you deliver projects. And one of the key components of it is you sort of have a task list. I'm not going to get technical here, but you have a task list of all the things that you want to do.
Yeah.
And then what you say is, it could be 6 months worth of work. And it's all thrown in there in that list. And you decide, say, like, I'm going to do what they call as a sprint. And they say, like, I'm going to do a sprint for the next 2 weeks. So I'm going to perform tasks for the next 2 weeks, and I'm going to achieve all these tasks that I'm setting out to perform. So you take them, you decide on the priorities from that big task list, and you put it into your list. And when it goes into your list, that's what you decide that is important to you, you want to achieve over the next 2 weeks, for instance. And so they're in a scheduled mode. So you've scheduled them to be done over the next 2 weeks. And then each day, you'll take the tasks that you think are achievable for that day, and then you put them in progress. And you say, this is what I'm doing today. Okay. And once they're in progress, you just focus on those. You don't have that kind of shadow in the back of your mind going, did I forget something? What am I supposed to do? Yeah. But have you ever had an email that was sort of upsetting to you? Or like you go, I have to do this or something like that. And then you forget about the email, but the imprint of that negativity stays on you.
Yeah.
And then you go, why am I feeling down?
Yes.
So that email, I have to deal with it,
Yep.
Have you ever had that experience?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Okay, so what I do is I'll add that email to the to-do list, and I just that negativity that's associated with it is done. I don't actually. It's
I find that too.
Yeah.
If I make a list, I feel like a weight's been lifted off me because the list is there. I can come back to it at any time. It's not going to get forgotten. Somehow it seems to help.
Well, it's not cloud-like, the whole thing that we deal with. Like, one of the biggest reasons why people don't achieve their goals is because they don't take time to actually formulate what their goals are.
Yeah, so it's very airy-fairy.
Yeah, and when it is like that, when it's not solid or concrete, then you don't know where you're going to, so you will never achieve these goals.
You don't know where to begin.
It's the same thing with fears, so quite often, and fears are even worse than goals, because fears are a negative feeling within you that actually holds you back from achieving a million things. So I make a list of things that I'm worried about or concern me or I'm afraid of, and I actually define them, and I go like, okay, well, so this is what I'm worried about, and this is why I'm worried about it, and I think this is what I need to do to overcome it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's actually really helpful because, I obviously make a list of all the things I have to do, but I haven't made a list of my fears, and that's the sort of thing that you're right, it just hangs over you, and it can be small things, but it will still slow you down.
Yeah, because if you're just afraid, the natural tendency is to avoid.
It is.
And with avoidance, that fear amplifies. Yeah. So just, if you write it down, it's not going to get worse.
No.
And then it becomes concrete, and then you can just add it to the to-do list, and it just becomes another thing to do. Like you just need to address it.
Yeah.
And the thing about making a list, that's a great thing, but just scheduling what you want to do for the day is
not just a list that's just sitting there.
Yeah, that's right. So just for today, that's one of the big things that I find is you make a list and then you go, I need to achieve this over the next, say, 3 months. No, that's too long. You have to say what you need to do today, because today is the only thing you have.
Yeah.
You don't have tomorrow yet.
Yeah.
You only get tomorrow when it becomes today. So you work with today, and you go, this is from here, these are the priorities I need to address today.
Yeah.
And you just do that, and then the next day you've got less items on that list. You might add stuff to it, of course, to
Yeah, I add stuff that I've already done, so then I can cross it off.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, good. I just thought of 5 things I did that aren't on the
yeah.
list.
Being born, done. Right? That's a good
Breathe,
list.
crossed
Yeah.
off.
Yeah. That's one that's has recurrence on it. You have to breathe every, 5 seconds.
But it does. See, this is what I find with trying to simplify. What I've found is that it's not just your life and your busyness that clutters everything. It's your thoughts. It can be your food. It can be the clutter in the house can totally do your head in. I don't know if you ever feel like that, but I do. Right now I'm looking at all the stuff that I need to unpack and put away in my room from being away for a month, and it's kind of doing my head in, so I'm not going to look at it.
It is funny, like that kind of procrastination against doing what you know is good to do, and why do we not do it? And that's probably a topic for something else, but there's a really good book called The War of Art. Not The Art of War, it's called The War of Art. And
I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, it's really good. It's he talks about the idea of resistance and how he likens growth to the growth of a tree, and the way that he would sort of describe it is a tree is growing and growth is great, but inevitably as a tree grows, there's a shadow that gets cast underneath it, and that shadow is resistance, and it's just another phase of growth. And what happens with anything that you want to do is that you see that there is going to be resistance in achieving a task. You'll always feel part of you holding back from getting to where you want to get. And that's a normal part of actually trying to get something done. And one of the things that you can use is when you feel that procrastination tendency there and you realize it, that's when you can sort of say, that's an opportunity for growth that I'm trying to avoid there. So then when that clarity is there, you can sort of approach things a little bit more differently, because it's no longer just a task. You see it as something that's going to be really good for you, and that blocker is there stopping you from achieving your own happiness or getting somewhere where you need to get to.
Yeah.
But the book is great, much larger than that, the concepts in it, and really, it's really.
I tend to procrastinate.
Yeah.
Everything's too hard. Everything's too busy. I'm just going to go make a cake.
Master cake.
Yes.
Yeah.
But with this book that I've been reading, it's really interesting. She divides life into like 7 different areas that she needs to simplify in, and like food and what else is there? I'm trying to think. Just what you own, like having too much stuff, so decluttering, I guess you would say, giving away to charities, and then cutting down on buying, because we all, in the Western culture, just buy all the time because we can, not because we need.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. I just want to hang on that for just 1 second.
Yep.
So I had this realization a while ago. Like you and I talk a lot about food and things like overeating and just getting, putting too much sugar in our bodies. And the reason why we do that, like why we love eating a lot of fat and sugar, is because typically those kinds of macronutrients were not available to us. So now that they are abundant, the shut-off mechanism inside us just isn't there, because we never had that kind of abundance available to us before.
In nature, you don't have bucket loads of sugar from everything.
So we become obese and sick with this stuff. But on the flip side as well, there's the hoarder's obesity. It's an external obesity that comes from this mechanism that we have inside us to keep things for the rainy day, and we become overweight with all the excess stuff around us, and it holds us back. And it's the same kind of sickness that exists within us as human beings who overeat, but I find it fascinating to think about it in that way.
That it's like a sickness in the mind.
Yeah, it's not a sickness. You're not like a bad person for it. It's
No.
just that this is how we've evolved. We've evolved to be people who will, if we find an excess of berries, we're going to maybe dry them up and keep them for winter and try to keep as much as we can. If there's a lot of buffalo around, we're going to smoke it and dry it and keep as much as we can available because we don't know the future. We just don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. And it's the same thing now. So we're acting upon these evolutionary senses that we have inside us that, yeah, we should keep these things. Like they're important. Look at it. Like, how am I going to throw this out? What if I'm going to buy a serial printer in the future? I need, all these cables that I've put aside. And
don't talk to me about cables.
Yeah, I know.
I don't even know what most of them are for.
Yeah, exactly. But you keep them because one day.
Because what if I throw it away and then it was for something?
Yeah, that's the big fear. I've never come back to a cable, but I've got boxes of them.
Oh, it drives me crazy. But even things like, just clothes. They often say, go through your wardrobe and anything that you haven't worn in the last year, get rid of.
Yeah.
That's so hard because I'm like, yes, but it wasn't that cold a winter. So what if next winter is really cold?
Yes. And,
I'm going to have to keep these 3 gigantic black coats, even though I live in far north Queensland.
Yeah.
I do travel to other cold places, though.
Well,
but
do you think there's a balance? Like,
of course there's a balance because you can be silly and just chuck things out willy-nilly, which my husband does tend to do. And then he has to go and buy it again in 3 months, which drives me batty.
Yeah.
So you've got to find the balance. But I think my problem is I tend to say there's money in the bank, so it's okay. I can just buy another dress. I can buy another this. I can buy when you don't really need it. And that money could be helping someone who really does need it. If, I say I would like to help homeless people. I would like to help all these people, but you go and buy another outfit instead. And it's like, so this is what I'm trying to work on in my life. I'm not saying everyone else has to do that. I'm just saying that that's one of the things I'm trying to simplify in my life is realize when I don't really need to spend the money just to say no. And sometimes it's really hard.
Yeah, it's funny, like we've got this kind of thing that makes us want to possess stuff that we like.
We do.
And I find that really strange in me. Like I hear about a new invention, go, I'd love to have that, and then I'm like, but I've never needed that in my life.
Exactly.
Like, why would I love to have that now? Like, why do I feel an urge for something that I just discovered just like a second ago, and I feel like I need it.
Yeah,
and it's so weird. I've got this really funny comedian that I love. It's sort of on the topic of like how we behave and think about these things. And his name is Louis C.K. and he talks about how he went on an airplane once, and on the airplane they said, okay, on this airplane we have a new system that will allow you to use the internet while you're on the plane.
Yeah,
and the guy like he goes, wow, imagine that, like you can be online in an airplane, like that's amazing.
Yeah.
So the airplane takes off and he goes, there I was checking my email and whatever, and then the internet stopped working and the pilot goes, excuse me ladies and gentlemen, just to let you know we're having some trouble with the internet on the airplane, it won't be available for the rest of the trip. And the guy next to him goes, hold on, like now you're upset about something that you never knew existed, and like you had access to the internet, like
you would have survived quite fine without it if the pilot hadn't mentioned that it was available. And
that's how I feel about a lot of things in my life. It's just this kind of thing where like you have an iPhone 6 and the 6S comes out and you go like, I want the iPhone 6S now, and it's just a weird mechanism inside us that just makes us want to have more and possess more and better things, and just it gives us this kind of disregard for these things that we used to own and love before, but also the attachment that's around it makes us want to keep those things around us, which is the older things, even though we've moved on. Like, and I don't really understand it fully why we have that, but it's so clear that in most of us this kind of tendency is there.
I think a couple of good bits of advice that I've read, one lady said her grandmother always taught them that whenever you wanted to buy something, there was something that you really wanted, she said you had to wait a month, and if you still wanted it after that, then you could buy it. I was like, wow, that would
Wow.
just cut out so much.
Yes.
I mean, it would keep the important things in there, but that new dress you wanted, well, by a month's time, you would have gone on to another one, wouldn't you? Oh,
Well,
sorry, you don't think in dresses. Sorry, that's just me.
yeah. I don't know if I can relate to that.
No, okay, yeah, sorry. So just I think of my kids also. They get $10 for pocket money, and it's burning a hole in their pocket, and they have to spend it right now. It's like,
Yeah,
why don't you wait? Because if you save it, you'll have a bit more and you can buy something that's actually decent.
you can't. So it's so weird. So one of those things that hoarding brings to mind for me is this inability for us to live in the moment. And what I mean by that is it's a symbol for a past that you're holding on to and a projection to a future that you fear or desire. And that's what I feel hoarding is. And it's a very, very cloud-like, nefarious affair. You don't know why these things are there, but it's more of a past and future attachment.
Yeah.
And as you know, Joe, I'm really into kind of I'm not a Buddhist or anything, but I'm really into living in the moment and
Yeah.
the art of Zen and that kind of thing. And I'm trying to become a better person, trying to live more in the now, and trying to sort of avoid too much complication and thinking too much about the future. And I find that the therapy comes to you when you let go of these things, because in a way they're a trap. They're a trap for you to live within that kind of momentum of duality between the past and the future. And if you sit down and just observe yourself for a minute, you are free of all these things. You don't need, like, all you have is your body, really, and that's all that you've got. And in any given moment, like you and I are sitting down and talking now, and we've got all this clutter and stuff around us and all these things in the garage, but these things are there and they're kind of attached to us in a way, but our lives do not completely depend on them. Like, we are actually just these beings sitting down here having a conversation right in the moment. But once we get out of this and we are in a state of mind that is not present as we are now, then these things start taking effect and they start playing into this attachment to a past and an attachment to a future, which I think it stops us from living in the moment, if you see what I mean. Well, do you feel that way too?
Yeah, I think, obviously, like you said earlier, you do have to find a balance, because you've got to do your work. We can't help but be a bit busy, because kids have got to have lunches made for school. We've got to take them to sport. We've got to, clean the house. We've got to do all these things. We've got jobs. We've got family. But finding a way to keep it simpler and also to take those times out to stop and think, for me, to stop and think about what's really important, even if it's only 5 minutes, to just take a break and pause and refocus and not get swept away by all the busyness, so that it's like your work and your jobs and your to-do list can take over, and your identity and who you are and your...
You become what you do rather than...
Yeah, you become what you do rather than who you are, and your family suffers from that. Always getting... I find when I get like that, I rush past my kids and I'm too busy to talk, and I'll have my youngest one especially call me back out of that and say, "Mum, you're not listening to me. Mum, look at me." And I'm like, oh, goodness, you have to really stop and take yourself out of that busyness sometimes and go and sit down and play with the kids, or go outside and sit together and have lunch in the sunshine, or little things like that. I find they simplify me because I realize what's really important. Does that explain it? It's hard to explain.
Have I told you this? Like, when I'm walking under the rain once. Like I was getting rained on, and I was like my whole body was getting drenched, and I sort of hunched down trying to avoid getting more wet. But it was ridiculous. I was going to get wet anyway, and I walked, and then I was like, well, I'm going to get wet. You know, I'm just going to be wet now, and I'm just feeling miserable because I'm getting rained on. But my reality is not going to change. I'm getting rained on. You know, and so it's like, all right, well, you know, I'm getting rained on. You know, and then when I thought that, I just felt happier. I felt like I was okay to be getting rained on, and then I enjoyed it. And I thought, you know, actually walking in the rain isn't bad if you don't mind it. You know, and this. It was just such a weird thing to actually think about, but from there it just kind of opened up this idea of how you can have so many different approaches and ways to look at a certain situation, and your thoughts are gonna come anyway, but how you react to your thoughts is the big deal here.
Well, that's why I think your attitude changes things. Like if you're going to look at everything negatively, it's going to stress you out. But if you can find the positive, and that's why they say living in the moment, finding things to be grateful for in the moment that you're in, and thinking about those things will totally change the situation around. So like walking in the rain, to say, well, you know, I don't know, focusing on how fresh it is and how great it is to be able to be out walking or whatever it is that will really change it.
What we sort of have in that experience is we kind of think about the future where we will be not rained on. You know, like we want to get to a point in the future where we're not getting rained on.
Yeah.
And it's not where we're at the moment. So we are miserable because
that's right.
we are, the current moment is not where we want to be. But if we just realize that the current moment is all we have, and then when that realization is so true for us, then we can make these kinds of shifts in consciousness that allow us to view the current experience for being a negative one. It becomes a positive one if we choose to do so. I mean, it's really hard, and it's also hard to tell other people, you know, like let's say you're having an argument with someone, and you just say, look, you know, you've got to relax and just sort of look at this in a different way. Like they probably just get even more upset at you for trying to sort of preach to them or something like that. But it's an internal thing that you have to learn as a skill for yourself to always realize that whatever automatic emotion that you may have around a certain moment, it's actually something that you can change. But the importance to that when it comes to simplification is that you don't really need much to be happy, because all you need is you look at the time that you're in, and we all know that studies have been done about and heard about of these studies where people who are less wealthy, like the poor, are usually happier. And why is that? Why do they feel that way? And it's obviously there's no correlation between material possessions and happiness.
Yes, exactly.
An ever-growing task list of to-do lists. It doesn't mean that you're happy if you got more to do. So what is true happiness, and why do we want to simplify it? And I think it comes down to this attitude that you garner around where you see your thoughts. So I like to do these things that try to keep me grounded in the moment. So things like reading a book, which is an activity rather than a pastime, like watching television.
Exactly. I agree. I'd much rather read a book.
It's because you're actually using your brain. It's not being sort of projected into your head. You use your own imagination. You're in the moment more so. Things like going for a walk or meditating. Disconnecting from technology, just not having my phone when I go for a walk is a big deal. There's a lot that you can do sort of to like exercise, for instance.
Definitely, that really helps.
Yeah. What else, Joe? What
I find for me getting out into nature in the sunshine or the rain, barefoot if I can, and just I love to take a camera with me, because I find that makes me really focus on the beauty around me. And, even when, like, I've had people say this to me, you know, oh, well, I live in this city. I don't live in a beautiful place like you do.
Yeah.
So it's not the same. But I've found even when I'm in the city, I'll still have my camera with me, and I will still find beautiful things to take photos of wherever I am. There's always something. It might be a beautiful bit of architecture. It might be a beautiful tree in a street that you're looking up through the leaves to the sky, or it might be a little flower stuck in the crack of a wall. There's always something.
Well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Well, it is. It is. But that relaxes me, and that helps me to, again, focus on being grateful for where I am right now.
Yeah, you know, they don't say stop and smell the roses
for no reason.
But that's, I think, when you're in an environment as toxic as a city life, which is one of the worst places that you can be as a human being. If you're trying to live like a more primitive kind of life, one that is more in tune with how our ancestors lived, is, you know, you get desensitized to the beauty around you because you associate it with the stress that you get out of that city, and it's really hard to find the beauty in it. But luckily, places like Sydney, you know, you've got like the Royal Botanical Gardens and places like that are just stunning.
And the gorgeous old buildings and the harbour, and I've taken some gorgeous photos there.
It is beautiful.
But also, for me, just taking 5 minutes out here and there. And one of the things that I really loved about this book that I read, I should just mention, it's called Seven, and it's by Jen Hatmaker, and it's basically she calls it a mutiny against excess, and she's trying to cut down in a lot of areas so that she can see what it's like to live very simply like most of the world lives. But she talks about having the 7 sacred pauses each day, which is more of a, I guess, a mystical Catholic tradition. And I'm not Catholic, but I am Christian. And I really loved her ideas on that, because it talks about taking certain times of the day, like where you just pause for 5 minutes. And like you're saying, you put away the past and the future. You think about right now, you think about, like you pause and you might pray and ask for blessing, or you may pray for people who need help, or you may pray for the homeless, or you may think about all the things you have to be grateful for right now. But it's consciously pausing and doing that. And it doesn't have to be 7 times, and it doesn't have to be how she said to do it or anything. But I love the principle of pausing at different times throughout the day, and really just being grateful.
Yeah, there's a yoga practice, like a meditation practice, that's like that, where you sort of focus in on people that are really, really important to you, and you wish them all the love that you can wish them, and you just focus your love on that, and then you focus on people that you know, but you know, anyone, and then you wish them love, and you sort of wish them a really good, happy life, and then you focus on people that you really, really don't like, and then you know, wish that they die. No, I'm just joking.
I was going to say, stop that.
You wish that, you know, happiness and love for them as well, and with that kind of attitude, it's the positivity that you resonate within you will carry on through your day, and
it does. It really does, and it makes you more caring about other people. Also, I think when you stop thinking about your own problems and issues constantly and start thinking about other people, and it might take a conscious effort at first, because we're so used to being so, you know, inward looking, I guess is the word, I don't know, where you know, you constantly see all you have to do and all you're having to put up with and all your problems, to stop and look at others.
That's what we usually do as people. I learned a really beautiful word recently. It's called sonder. Have you heard of it?
No.
You know, it's the realization that each passerby has a life as vivid as and complex as your own.
Yes.
And
what was it? What was the word?
Sonder, Sonder.
Okay.
And you know, that's something that, you know, I've experienced in my life as well. Like you can be walking down Pitt Street in the city and you're surrounded by, you know, thousands of people, and you know, just the sheer complexity of the life around you just is stunning. You know, it's just feel overwhelmed by the amount of life. But quite often we're looking at our phone and trying to really, really avoid it.
eye
going back
contact.
to, yeah. But just such a big thing to realize that you are one organism in this intense, immense life form that's around you.
And every person around you is a person with a life like you.
Yeah, and just seeing people meet. I ran into like past two girls that walked past each other, and they just had this biggest smile on their face. They just hadn't seen each other for years. It seemed like, and they just walked past each other, by chance, and it was a beautiful thing to just look at it. And then you get that realization of like, these people have their own lives, and what a beautiful thing to have witnessed. And that was just something that happened in that moment, and then it passed by. And they had no luggage, they had no hoardings, they had no million things around them, and they were just doing a simple act of walking, and from that they had this incredible happiness that just beamed out of them. And it's such a beautiful thing to have walked past,
witness.
And these are the true moments in our life. We're unencumbered by possession, and you see beauty in the others around you, and you make connections in life, and that's what it's really all about, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
Getting a bit too philosophical here, Joanne.
No, we can get philosophical on the podcast, can't we?
Yeah. A podcast, we can do whatever we want.
Yeah, that's right. They don't have to listen. You can turn it off if you're finding this dull, people. But I think one of the things that I've been more aware of lately is like homeless people and people that are escaping from abuse and things like that. And it's so easy to block them out because you don't understand them, and it's messy, and you want to keep out of their way. And you see that a lot, like in the city, people just all rushing by people that are sitting there. I just have this memory from when I was in Scotland a couple of months ago, and there was this old guy sitting on the bridge. It was freezing cold, so cold, and he was sitting on the wet cement. It was raining, and he had a little tiny blanket over his lap, and he was begging, and that just really hit me, and I have not been able to get that picture out of my mind. Right. I did get him a cup of hot coffee, but I just always felt like, what can you do to help these people? They have lives. They are real people. And I don't know, there's something really humbling about realizing you have so much and so many people in the world have nothing. And I think that's sort of what kicked off this whole idea in my mind that I need to simplify and use what I have to help others because I have too much and so many people have nothing. So that's very philosophical, and that's what I've been thinking about.
I mean, it's really courageous to think about this, right? Because I bet you this wasn't the first time in your life that you'd witnessed something like that, but it's taken you so many years to actually start really trying to integrate that kind of emotion.
We don't see that here where I live. So it's not, we don't see homeless people. I mean, obviously we see people who are suffering, and I've been raised in a family where we always have helped the people, and we have lived very simple. Growing up, we lived very simply, and we always had people living with us that were like escaping abusive husbands or alcoholics recovering, kids on drugs recovering. We always had people like that staying with us.
Yeah.
And so I've been raised like that, but I think I got away from it because I was so busy.
Right.
And then to see that sort of brought me back to, is my life getting so crazy that I can't see anybody else? All I can see is me and my stuff,
Yeah, there's definitely that, but I also think that, we aren't built for this world in a sense that we have these empathy mechanisms inside us, which you typically would have been confined to the tribe that is around us, and we could do something useful.
You're right. There's only so much we can do when it's like you see all these horrible things on the news, and like the refugees that are suffering, and it's very frustrating because you think, well, what can I actually do? What difference can I make?
I think if you the best you can do is be good to the people who are around
you. Actually,
and
have
within and if you find that your life takes you down the path where you can influence at a larger scale and do things that are your scale, then that's fine. But there should be no guilt, I think, associated with you doing the best that you can with the resources that you do have.
Yeah.
And it's like the we all would sort of love to be able to solve the world's problems.
Yes.
And, but the burden is too heavy and it's too big. It's not for a single individual to do so. And if everyone looked after the people around them in their own communities and families and lives, then we wouldn't have this problem, I would imagine.
And I think if everybody worked on, not wasting food, living simply, buying local and seasonal and all of those things that you can do to help your local community, you are doing your part, and it does make a difference to other people. Yeah. It doesn't seem like a lot at the time, but it does make a difference.
Well, it all adds up.
It all adds up.
And you pay it forward. Some people get looked after and they look after other people, and it's a chain reaction, hopefully. With regards to food and not wasting and things like that, you and I often talk about simplifying the what we cook as well. And I think that's one big thing, one big area for people is that you don't cook 3 meals a day or anything like that. Just try to, like for me, I make a large batch of food for that would last me a day or two sometimes.
Wow.
And that's what we sort of focus on eating rather than trying to cook all these different meals every day, and because it does take a lot more of our time.
It does.
But quite often we find ourselves not really doing that, and then you have all the cleaning up the kitchen and the washing up and all that kind of stuff. And it's so time consuming.
It is. It takes up a lot of the time. I always do try to cook in bulk as much as I can and use all the leftovers. And that, like you say, that really does help with cutting down on how much you eat and also how much you waste.
How have you found gaps in the simplification process?
I've found gaps really helpful because I think that's another thing that made me start thinking about simplifying, because before gaps, when I was doing my cookbook and everything, I was just cooking like crazy, and it was all good food and everything, but it can get overwhelming for people who are trying to eat healthy and cook everything from scratch, because it takes time, and then you feel like, well, I've got to make these sweets and I've got to do this baking and I can't use this and I've got to use that, and it just gets quite overwhelming. But with gaps, because you started with broths, meat and veggies, there you've simplified, and you bring it back to a small group of ingredients that are very nutritious without all the fillers and fluff, and it doesn't take a lot of prep time except for maybe chopping vegetables. It's slow cooking. So you just get it going in the morning, and then it's when you have dinner, you just chuck a few more bits in, a few more veggies, and then it's ready. And so that really helped me, because I know a lot of people think of gaps as overwhelming, but I actually found it simplified my cooking. And just how delicious can traditional slow-cooked foods be? I mean, you don't need a lot of stuff in there. And so that's been good for me. And also realising that we were having way too much baking and sweets and fancy stuff.
Yeah.
I have no problem with that kind of thing now and then. And I might make cupcakes out of almond meal or something a couple of times a week so the kids have them to take when they go somewhere. But it's not something that I feel like I need to do every day, which is what I used to do. So that's definitely, kids, if you're hungry, there's bananas and there's nuts and there's some leftovers in the fridge.
Yeah. See, I don't have the perspective that you have, because I don't actually look after my kids the same way that you do. Like, my wife is the primary caregiver.
Yeah.
But from perspective of, a male, and the simplicity that I try to add in my life. Like, I, for instance, just don't have breakfast at all.
Isn't that not good for you, Fuad?
No, it's why?
Well, they say that if you don't have a good breakfast, that you don't sleep as well at night.
No, that's not true.
Okay.
I find it actually really good for you. I find
I would be a wreck by about 8 o'clock.
Well, that's because you have probably more
very fast metabolism.
Yeah, and I've got more fat storage than you do.
Yeah.
I do eat big dinners, like at around 6:30, 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're designed to fast. We're designed to go through, like, 16 hours or whatever it is of not eating, and it's detoxifying for us. It gives you more clarity.
Well, I know other people that eat like we do have said that they don't need lunch.
Yeah, I don't eat breakfast because I just don't have the appetite, to be honest. Where I don't wake up feeling like I need to eat.
Okay.
I'll happily go on till 12:30 or so until I've eaten something. I'll have a cup of coffee, like just black.
Yeah.
And it's not like I do it because I want to simplify, but I do find that, I actually have more energy when I haven't eaten in the morning.
Okay.
And because I used to have metabolic syndrome, and I used to be heavily dependent on carbohydrates, and I ate a lot of carbohydrates. I find that if I skip breakfast and I've depleted more of my glycogen, that I can tolerate a little bit more carbohydrates for lunch.
Okay.
And I'll have a low carb dinner, and then I'm set. I'm doing all right then.
That works for you. And that's the interesting thing, isn't it, with food, that if I did that, I'd be a mess. But just different body types.
Yeah, and also I'm definitely way lower carb than you would be, I would imagine. And you have this, they call it keto adapted, where the mitochondria in my cells are very happy to burn fat. Joe, you don't have any fat on you, so you got to burn something.
A little bit.
Yeah. So that works for me. But like, just not having to worry about breakfast, that gives me a little bit more time to, say, play with the kids in the morning or whatever. And but yeah, that's when I was at the restaurant. I found myself eating, like, very sporadic times, and the stress really, really piled up, and I had a million things on my mind, and I was trying to work, like trying to piece so many different parts of this puzzle, and my life became super, super complex, and I became extremely tired, and for a while I was in this kind of zombie state that I actually never even realized I was in, because I had sunk into it gradually. And now, after the restaurant stopped and I've had time to rest and sleep and
Pull back
have a bit of retrospective as to where I was, like, I feel, that there's a darkness that comes with complexity and exhaustion that you'd never actually realize until you get yourself out of it.
Yes.
So I think, people need to be really, really careful about how far they push themselves and how much commitment they have in their life and how many complex things they're adding to themselves.
I think you're right.
And that's one of the things that simplification brings to you, is this kind of ability to go, oh wow, I actually never realized I was this exhausted, or I was this overcommitted. When you just need to rest for a bit. So take a break, take a holiday, make it, 2-3 weeks, try to get out of it. How was your holiday?
It was awesome. And I was just going to say, when I've gotten sick, I'll just mention this first. When I've gotten sick, people have said to me, oh, you just do way too much and you just need to slow down. And I'm thinking, I don't do too much, because when you're in it, you don't feel like you're doing too much sometimes. And you feel like, I'm coping okay. What are they talking about? And then you get really sick. And I was, a while back, I was sick for 3 weeks. And then the last time I got sick, it was about a few days. It makes you stop and think, and you realize how much you actually are doing. Going away on holiday was great, because you don't have all the stuff there with you to do. And so you have to take a break. And when you come back, you're like, yeah, I really do need to simplify. They were right.
And the thing is, like, you're not an expert at this, Joy. Like, you've always had a simple life.
Yeah, that's it.
All of a sudden you were thrown into this kind of crazy Thermomix world. Like that? That's a good joke.
And it's kind of it's kind of built up little by little, which is where you don't notice. I think you don't realize how much you've added until you take a complete break, and then you go, okay, let's reassess here. What do I not need to be doing? Because it does get all too much so easily. Yeah.
Well, that's great. It's great that you've gotten to that point where you're feeling relaxed. I can definitely hear it in your voice,
Oh,
and
that's good.
yeah. So I'm glad you're back.
Well,
You're back.
it's good to have friends like Fuad who give you a good slap when you're overdoing it.
I try to be nice.
In a nice way.
Right, so, what I'm going to do is I'll go through the items that I spoke about just at a high level, just to summarize. And
Yeah,
if you want
that'd
to do
be
the
good.
same, then. Right, so this is my list for the top 9 things that I try to do to keep my life simple. So I try to meditate, and that could be just putting my earphones on before I go to sleep. And there's a really good application called Headspace that I use, and goes through 10 minutes each night. And it's sort of really nice and relaxing, and it helps me go to sleep really well, and it clears my mind, and I wake up the next day feeling great. I also try to read a book. I try to have a book that I'm reading all the time. I try to go for a walk at least once a day. I I've learned to say no nicely to people. I try to disconnect from technology, so I usually put my phone on airplane mode after 8 o'clock or so.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'm working on decluttering my house, so trying to donate or throw things out that I don't need. I'm also cooking more simply and in large batches that will last for a longer bit of time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a daily to-do list that I prioritize, and I focus on what I want to do for that day, and I achieve those things without having to worry about all the backlog stuff that would be scheduled for another day.
Mm-hmm.
I make a list of the things that I'm worried about, and I define what it is that I'm worried about and why I'm worried about that thing. And I also write down what would happen if that thing came true. And I would also write down what I can do to make sure that that fear is not realized. And I add the to-do back into my to-do list. And yeah, so these are my big tips for simplifying.
That's good. And I'll just add a couple of mine, again, with the cooking, using really basic ingredients and slow cooking, which really helps me to manage my time, and making large batches. Getting the kids together for time to spend together, which I find is really important. Reading a book together, or going for a walk together, or just getting outside, having meals together, things like that. And not letting things that are not as important get in the way of that, because I think it's very easy to do that. Also, just getting outside and sitting in the sunshine with a cuppa, that's always helps me to stop and refocus.
Yes.
And pausing different times throughout the day to refocus, check my list again, think about if I'm doing well or not, because sometimes I have to give myself a little reminder on being in the moment and not getting so stressed. And also just getting rid of things whenever I do the washing, do the cleaning, finding things that I can take and give away to people, so that I'm not cluttering up my life with things that I don't actually use. So those are a few of my little tips.
Great tips, Jo.
Yeah, so I think it's definitely challenging to not get caught up in the do more, have more, eat more, buy more mentality. That's pretty much our world. But it's important to work on this and just keep doing little bits to change and to simplify. And it just makes life a lot happier, I think, when it's simpler. So thank you so much, Fuad, for all your great advice and tips and discussing my deep and meaningful philosophical ideas with me.
Love it, Jo.
And I hope you all learnt something and found it helpful, and that you'll be able to put some of these ideas into practice in your own lives. And if you've got any questions or comments, you feel free to hop onto my Facebook page, Quirky Cooking, or Fuad's, which is the food blog. And also you can leave comments on the website www.thewellnesscouch.com/A Quirky Journey. And we'd love for you to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. And you can also check out thewellnesscouch.com, where you can view the entire range of wellness podcasts available. So keep working on those small changes, and we'll be back to share more of our journeys with you next week. Thanks for listening, everyone. Bye. See you, Fuad.
Bye, Jo.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.